Vanity Fair exclusive, Pamela Anderson, uncensored and on her own terms. It's a Scary Place, but I Like Scary Places, by Julie Miller. When Pamela Anderson was growing up, her mother told her there was no such thing as natural beauty. Beauty required at least an hour in front of a mirror, she explained, and if you brushed and powdered and glossed enough, beauty was power. Speaking to Vanity Fair from her hometown of Ladysmith, Canada, Anderson recalls that her mother's notes on her TV show appearances or editorial spreads have always been about the hair or makeup. She doesn't hear what I'm saying or talking about. She's just looking at the pictures. Now, Anderson is 55 years old and done playing the Barbie doll cartoon character, whose dialogue doesn't matter, she says. She shed the teased hair, liquid eyeliner, and skin-tight dresses for loose-fitting sweaters practical enough for lawn work. This morning, between an NPR interview and journaling a few pages of her stream of consciousness thoughts, she raked leaves. Billions of people have seen her body in various stages of undress, covering Playboy, slow jogging on Baywatch, and cavorting in a private home movie that was stolen from her and former husband Tommy Lee's home and uploaded on the internet, never to disappear. Anderson says she did not make a cent from the tape, whose release earned the distributors $77 million in less than 12 months and deeply traumatized Anderson. Yet, just ahead of releasing her HarperCollins published memoir, Love, Pamela, and her Netflix documentary, Pamela, A Love Story, in which she emotionally bears all. She feels more vulnerable than she's felt in her 50-odd years. Speaking from a piano bench in her home, she calls the impending January 31st dual debut date frightening. I don't know how they will be received, she says. It's a scary place, but I like scary places. Well practiced in the art of deflection, she adds an oft-repeated self-deprecating coda. People don't really associate me with big expectations, so I can only surprise people. I don't have a lot to live up to. She doesn't know if the world will accept this new natural iteration of herself. In the documentary, like on this FaceTime, she is lovely, if completely makeup-free. She points to her face. If people love me like this, then it could be good, Anderson tells herself. I'm almost 56 years old. This is it. It's not that bad. Last year, when Anderson's mother caught her daughter filming the documentary in a loose-fitting dress, she scoffed, "You're not even showing off your figure anymore." Anderson remembers retorting, "I don't know, Mom. Just let me go through this." This being a kind of metamorphic awakening for Anderson that began with a broken heart and a sold Malibu beach house. A broken heart is always an interesting place to be, she muses. It's always an artistic place anyway. During the pandemic, Anderson closed out the chapter of her life spent in the elite California zip code and returned to her roots, Canadian normalcy. She started renovating a house and felt fulfilled in making it my art project, designing and decorating her new life. On top of the upright piano behind her is one of the first paintings she purchased, a stormy landscape in a gilded frame, plus a framed snapshot of her and her golden retriever Zeus in front of the Louvre. He'd only poop at the Louvre, she explained. Speaking about the house renovation, She says she started to romanticize everything. Everyone was looking good, all the contractors that were here. She married one in December 2020, and around the time the marriage ended, about a year later, it ended up being a disaster. She was ready for some serious introspection. At the insistence of her sons, Brandon and Dylan Lee, the actor sat down to tell her life story. They're just sick of defending their mom, she cracks, but they think that the full picture of my life is much more interesting than these shallow jabs. She had kept numerous journals since childhood and amassed a library of home movies from adulthood. And she handed these unedited archives over to Emmy-nominated director Ryan White for use in the documentary, which was co-produced by Brandon. Meanwhile, she put her life down on paper, her preferred mode of self-expression since childhood. Coming home to face my life as a whole and look at it from this perspective has been really great, she says. This has really felt like exposure therapy of some kind. What do they say? Just face it and erase it. I'm looking forward to putting it all behind me, too. During the process, Anderson, who has never tried traditional talk therapy, revisited her upbringing and came to understand how it impacted her choices as an adult. She writes that she was raised by a volatile, hard-drinking father and a mother who left him multiple times but always returned. At the height of her Baywatch stardom, Anderson married rocker and prolific partier Tommy Lee after spending only 4 days with him in Mexico. Tommy was the love of my life because we had such a beautiful, unique, romantic relationship and 2 beautiful boys, she maintains. Despite that love, though, Anderson abruptly ended the relationship in 1998 after Lee assaulted her while she was holding Dylan, then an infant. Lee pleaded no contest to spousal battery and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. I was very, very sensitive when it came to any kind of physical violence, says Anderson. I was not going to do that to my kids. Anderson recently confronted her mother about the marital decisions made by both of them. I said, I think the difference between us is that I chose my kids and you chose dad. I left my marriage because my kids were more important and I didn't want them to see that. She cringes, feeling bad. That was kind of a heavy thing to say. The most difficult passage of the memoir for Anderson to write was about the molestation that she suffered as a child by a female babysitter. I kept on taking it out and putting it back in, says Anderson of the passage. Then I thought, I have to say this. A lot of predators choose people or victims that will be ashamed or embarrassed to share the details of their abuse. If someone would read this book who's going through something similar, maybe they'll tell somebody. I didn't tell anybody. I became shy and withdrawn, just living in my imagination. Anderson writes that when she was around 13, she was raped by a man more than a decade older than her. She also describes a boyfriend who let his friends assault her in the back seat of a car. Anderson vaguely references these traumas when describing her decision to flee Canada in the late 80s. When other things were happening, the pain compounded, and then I just went. I can't take this anymore. I need to do something crazy. Cue the call from Playboy. After a fateful Jumbotron appearance that led to her working as a Labatt beer spokesperson, Anderson was invited by the magazine to fly to LA, her first ever plane ride, and pose naked for its pages. In her memoir, Anderson describes posing for Playboy as cathartic, allowing her to reclaim her body and sexuality after the sexual violence she says she endured growing up. Anderson hopes that writing about her sexual trauma will inspire others to speak up and break this generational cycle of women responding to violence the way they've seen those before them handle it. I'm going to face it and figure it out so this doesn't keep happening, she says. Don't tell dad, or walking on eggshells can't be the right way to handle things. Women have come too far. We have to say it out loud. That's been the big discovery for me through all this. I'm determined to change. In the memoir, Anderson writes that her mode of reclaiming her sexuality, posing for Playboy, unfortunately unleashed a new trauma cycle. Though posing was my choice, she writes, the photos gave some people the impetus, sadly, to treat me without respect. She alleges that Tim Allen flashed her on the set of Home Improvement on her first day of filming when she was 23 and he was more than a decade older. I walked out of my dressing room and Tim was in the hallway in his robe, she writes. He opened up his robe and flashed me quickly, completely naked underneath. He said it was only fair because he had seen me naked. Now we're even. I laughed uncomfortably. After the excerpt was leaked, Allen denied the allegation to Vanity Fair via a rep, saying, "No, it never happened. I would never do such a thing." But Anderson insists it did. This true story is just one of many surreal and uncomfortable situations I learned to navigate, Anderson told Vanity Fair in a follow-up statement. My book goes into how it made me feel over the course of my life, and in this case, my career. I have no ill will toward Tim, but like the rest, it should have never happened. Anderson tells me that there were plenty of other men who acted inappropriately toward her. Strangers would tell her raunchy sex stories or sex jokes, or feel free to expose themselves. I always thought, what is that? She says. They would run around like little boys. I just thought, well, you created the awkwardness. After her and Lee's Stolen Home movie was edited and released as a sex tape, today it would be classified as revenge porn and protected by privacy laws. Anderson spent years as a painful punchline. Anderson never realized she was being treated unfairly. She just thought, well, this is it. This is how people see me. And she blamed herself for helping perpetuate the hypersexual association with her career decisions. I thought, I'm responsible for that too. I am part of that. When I ask about the public's recent reconsideration of women who were unfairly treated in the past few decades, including Britney Spears, Monica Lewinsky, and Janet Jackson, Anderson is quick to distance herself from the pack. I don't feel like a victim. I'm not trying to get any sympathy. Yes, the tapes were stolen, and that was a real invasion of privacy, she says, explaining that she included that chapter to make the memoir a complete audit of her life, not to make a plea for compassion. I'm just trying to tell my story from start to finish. Over the course of writing, Anderson came to realize she was something of a love addict, flitting from romance to romance, marriage to marriage, and she made a conscious decision to be alone. I've learned to try and do this without a life preserver, without having anyone around me to console me. I have to console myself, she says. That's been the hardest part of the journey, to go. I'm okay on my own. She catches herself and amends the statement with, "My dogs. I need my dogs," she laughs. "I can't be that alone. I had this wild, bumpy life and met a lot of interesting people along the way and had a lot of interesting love affairs," she continues. "But I feel like my life is more romantic now than ever. I have dinner for one or with my dogs. I'm the same person with or without someone. Rose petals in the bathtub, making my own rose oils, making my own candles. I'm kind of crafty all of a sudden." It was during this recent year of Pam that Anderson got a surprising offer to star on Broadway as the misunderstood vixen Roxy Hart in an 8-week run of Chicago. She jokes that she wasn't sure if she could sing, dance, or act on stage, let alone do all three at once. But she still threw herself into the endeavor wholeheartedly. She didn't miss a single show, arrived at the theater early to run through dance numbers each night. "I'm not necessarily gifted in those areas, so I needed to do it," and received surprisingly good reviews. In her dressing room, she kept a single picture on her mirror, a photo of herself at 3 years old, taken during story time at Lady Smith's local library, looking innocent and engrossed. "I felt like all I had to do as an adult was get out of the way and just let that little girl play on stage," she says. "That's what gave me the strength and push I needed." Being on stage for Chicago, Anderson says, was the first time during her career that she felt rooted for. "My career has been a bunch of baloney, kind of superficial. I wanted to see what I was capable of. It was so incredible to see my kids in the front row clapping. I thought, this is the first time I've ever really seen my kids with that kind of pride looking at me. The experience," she says, "was very fulfilling. I needed it. My soul needed it." Between the writing and filming and dancing and self-exposure therapy, Anderson feels like she's finally faced and embraced herself. "I feel much better prepared for life," she says, before delivering another self-deprecating follow-up, even though it's more than half over. Now she's just bracing for the public reaction when she again bears all. This is a very vulnerable place, she says, days out from the memoir and documentary's release date. "It feels like that first Playboy photo shoot, when I closed my eyes and opened them to that first flash bulb. That's what I feel like right now. Like these are going to come out, people are going to see them, and there's no turning back."